You're listening to Idea Charger Radio. Hey there, folks. It's Scott Cooksey, and welcome to Success Charger, the podcast that's dedicated to you. You know, it wasn't that long ago that, look at your feet, I was in those shoes. That's right, the ones that are on your feet. I was that guy that was sitting out there just like you when I knew that people started to look at me like I was just wired a little different. I knew I could see opportunity where other people just saw problems, and oftentimes I felt like I was a square peg in a round hole. Does that sound like you? Well, if so, welcome home. You're in the right spot, because Success Charger is the podcast dedicated to you, the person who wants to look at the world differently and knows that you've got this incredible something inside of you that's just begging to be unleashed. And we're going to get in there, we're going to unlock the door, we're going to throw that door wide open to the world and let you enjoy the success that you know you deserve. You know, some people look at this and they say, well, the only way for me to be truly successful is to be an entrepreneur. And certainly that's one channel, but it's not the only one. You know, for a long time in my own career, before I took the leap to being amongst the ranks of the self-employed and that I could pick and choose what I wanted to work on, I was an employee. Now, for some of you, let's look at what that looks like. We call it a 9 to 5, but let's be honest, who works those hours anymore? It's more like that traditional job, though, right? You comes with some benefits, which are good. I'm not going to downplay those. They're great. Benefits are good. You get a check no matter what. You know, you show up, you get a salary, those kind of things. But even within the confines of that traditional job, maybe you look at things differently. You see, I had a way of putting on a different pair of glasses, and I started looking at my traditional job as one that was really my business that was operating inside someone else's. The viewpoint I took was that somebody else is just paying my overhead and they're choosing to buy all of my available time. But it was a concept that allowed me to really think of myself as more of an employeepreneur. Somebody who could build a successful business inside of a business in spite of everything that was going on around me. And that was a truly empowering way that allowed me permission to look at running my business a little bit differently. Now, eventually, I did make the leap into totally being self-employed, and maybe some of you have already made that leap, and others of you are just somewhere in between. Look, no matter where you are right now, you are plugged into the Success Charger. So welcome. This is the place where we're going to share the stories. We're going to share the ideas and give you some of the insight you've been looking for. In short, I'm going to provide for you what I had wished I'd been able to find from somebody else. And I had to go out and dig around and find this and compile this all on my own and begin to build this whole story. And now that I've done the work, I want you to hear what it takes, because there's some really, really amazing things that I've learned along the way. And I think you're going to find them to be quite interesting for yourself. I am in a very unique position that I have the opportunity each month to go inside of a company or a couple of companies and really see what's going on inside from a leadership perspective, what's working inside their organizations, what needs a little help. And I work with organizations to help them maximize the relationships they build inside with each other and learn to communicate more effectively with each other so that they can build lasting, profitable relationships with their clients and customers. Folks, that's the ticket. You see, I've learned in my years of traveling around the globe, I've looked inside well over 1,000 companies and done it through hundreds of leadership workshops that I've had the chance to facilitate. And I've talked to people. I've looked at folks just like you. We sat kneecap to kneecap, looked eyeball to eyeball, and we talked about real issues that were going on inside your companies. And I've been able to give so many people some great advice that allowed them to go back and make success where they are. Not wait for success to happen to them, but go back, plug it in, charge it up, make it happen, bring back that fire. And man, has that been a cool experience. A while back, I started to compile some of these stories, and I realized they were starting to come out through a series of social media posts I would put out there. Sometimes I would write something a little longer, and it might come out as a blog post. Other times I would write it, and it would just be a tweet. And I started to condense some of these things down and compile the best of those ideas, put them into a small book that I've put together called Connect. It's 77 idea chargers to help generate high voltage results today. You want to find out more about that, just zip on over to ideacharger.com. Check out the website. You'll find a trailer for the book, how to order it, all the good stuff. What I've realized in putting that book together is I collected all these great ideas, but the magic is in the stories that are underneath each one of those 77 ideas you'll find in the book. And I needed a place to put those together. So I thought, you know what? What a perfect opportunity to build a podcast. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Even as a kid, one of the coolest gifts I got one year for Christmas from my grandparents was this little red battery-powered Panasonic cassette tape recorder. And my little brother and I would spend hours upon hours making these fake interview shows with our friends and with each other and sometimes just by ourselves, having a grand old time. And I had no idea that someday that would lead to my own career as a business leadership skills facilitator, as a consultant, and as a professional speaker out here in the world. And I'm really getting a chance now to live my dream that really I had the vision when I was a kid and I didn't even realize it. That's the kind of thing I want to find inside of you. Where's that passion? Where's that fire? Where's that real oomph that's inside of you that says, I want to be successful and I don't want it to feel like work. I just want to have a good time. Man, when I'm out making money, I'm having a good time. And it's a lot of fun for me. If you're not having that kind of experience right now in your job, then I'm going to suggest it's time to unlock something a little different for you. Look, here's what I know about you. You're wired differently. You see opportunities where other people see problems, and you, too, are that square peg somebody's trying to jam in a round hole. My story started out fairly traditional. I came out of college, had a degree in finance, and I went right into banking. And shortly thereafter, I found myself in the trust department of a bank, working with companies to help, selling retirement plans to companies. I was working pretty hard, and at the time, I probably didn't see the opportunity, honestly, that was in front of me. And I started to want a little bit more. I don't know if it was an opportunity I didn't see or if it was just that my perspective was a little different. And we'll talk about how I came to realize that. Right at the top of the market, the market was going and blowing in the late 90s. And I thought, man, I want to do something different. If I'm going to work 60 hours a week, I want to build my own book of business. Sounds like an entrepreneur, right? Sounds like you. You've probably thought the same thing. Why am I working so hard to build somebody else's business when I could be building my own? Folks, you can do both, and I'll show you how. So what happened was I made that transition away from a bank, went to, at that time, one of the biggest Wall Street firms in the world, and went to work for Merrill Lynch as a broker, and was really thought that I'd finally made it. I remember I did crazy stuff. Like I got measured for a suit in the office one day and started buying like $400 dress shoes. And I thought, man, it's never going to be any more difficult than it is right now. And boy, did I have no idea about what was about to happen. You see, the market had already topped out and I just didn't get the memo. So I hung on there for about a year until finally the company said, look, in this downturn, we just can't keep as many new brokers on board. And I had the opportunity to go somewhere else. So what did I do? I thought I'd try and experiment. And I took some of the ideas I'd learned from this large Wall Street firm, and I went back to my roots as a community banker. And this time was the investment rep inside of a small bank. And I stepped into, a hornet's nest of stuff. I had a manager that said, before I can help you, you're going to have to pay for all the sins of the people that were here before you. And I thought, boy, that's a burden to carry. And I started asking why, and it said, well, it became evident that I was the fifth person in as many years to sit behind the desk that I now occupied. There was a tiny, what I call train wreck of a business, a file cabinet full of files you couldn't decipher. I didn't know what accounts were open, what accounts were closed, who my clients even were. And then something truly scary happened. 9/11. The financial markets were closed for 5 days. It was the first time since the stock market crash in 1929 the market had been closed for that long, and I didn't know how to call my clients, how to make them feel any better, didn't know what to do. Frankly, I was scared, and I started to understand what was important. I said, I'm not going anywhere for a while. I'm going to be here in this business. The doors are just not going to open. I'm going to have to build a business right here, build a career, something that's here for the future. And I took a good hard look at the business. I took a good hard look at the lessons I'd learned working for that large Wall Street firm. And I said, what's transferable here? I saw an opportunity to change the business model. And I set out on a journey for the next 3 years, and I very successfully did that. I quadrupled the size of the business that we had in the 3 years that followed 9/11, the most tragic financial and otherwise scary event that had ever happened in my lifetime. And it did turn the world on its ear. If you go back and you look at poignant moments of time, September 11th, 2001 is one of those days, and I remember it vividly. And it changed the way people looked at the financial business. It changed the way we looked at a lot of businesses and the ways that we did a lot of things and lived our lives. And I knew that really the only way I was going to have control of any kind was to grab hold of my own destiny and start building something for the future that I knew that I and the family that I knew would come somewhere in my future was going to need. I set out on this journey. I told my boss what I was going to do. I told my boss's boss what I was going to do. I laid out a game plan, and I put it all into action. And sure enough, 3 years later, it had all happened. We'd quadrupled the size of the business. I had more recurring revenue than we'd had total revenue the first year I was there. And I was already on the path to doing some great things. The model was working great, but I had made one tragic and critical mistake. You see, as I've traveled around the world in the time since, I've been looking for that one thing that sets successful people apart. What I've learned is that it's connection. And that's where I made the mistake. I didn't focus on the connection that I needed with my boss. I built it with my coworkers. I'd built it with the clients. I'd even built it with prospects that later became my clients. I've got some great stories about people that lost a lot of money in the market and still walked out of my office with a smile on their face because somehow I gave them enough comfort to understand what had just happened and had treated them like a human being. I had built a relationship with that person that allowed us to endure some very difficult financial things, very personal things with them in their own life, yet they understood why they had hired me to help them out. Isn't that the kind of relationship you want with your customers? You see, I'd failed to build that relationship, though, with my own boss, and despite all my success after 3 years, it was time for me to take that show on the road. During the next few years, I found out how difficult this was really going to be. I've had some people point out some great books to me, and I'll be sharing with you along the journey here some of those reads that I found in hopes that you'll go out. If you haven't read them already, you'll start to dig in and find out what some of those are for yourself, and you'll begin to learn how to look at the world differently. But I had to go through a very difficult time. Now I'm going to fast forward to today. Let's fast forward to today. I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm spiritually stronger than I've ever been. I'm financially more successful than I've ever been. And I'm doing it on my terms. Folks, if this sounds good to you, then by all means, stay on board with this podcast as we travel forward, because I'm going to be sharing a lot of stories with you. Let's kind of kick things off. I just want to start with one of the quotes from the book. This is the book called Connect 77 Idea Chargers to Generate High Voltage Results Today. Again, you'll find it at ideacharger.com. And here's the first quote. Identify a large goal. Write it down. Write down those small steps to complete that goal. Then put them on your calendar. You see, no matter where you are, whether you work inside another company, you're working for yourself, having an idea in your head of what you want isn't enough. You've got to be accountable. And folks, I got to tell you, it's helpful to have an accountability partner, and we'll talk about how you can find some of those along the way, but you first have got to be accountable to yourself, because this journey is not going to be easy. In fact, it's probably one of the hardest things you've ever done. Think of one of the most difficult things you've ever overcome. Probably not going to be as hard as it will be to find that success, that independence, that wonderful enjoyment of life that you've been looking for. But you know what? It's totally worth it. I had to start by writing down some large goals. For me, that started in kind of a dark place. Following my time as a financial advisor, I went through a lot of personal changes in my life, had gone through a few setbacks in a number of different ways, and in short, made a lot of bad decisions. Now, none of these were life-threatening. None of these, caused me to have to go through a 12-step program or addiction recovery program, anything like that. But I will tell you, it was a series of failures and challenges along the way that were quite discouraging. And to be quite candid, I found myself in a very difficult place. I was alone. It was just me. And I had spent up all the cash that I had saved. And then I got into my credit cards and I got into some trouble there too. And one day I can remember the day when it finally hit me that I was in over my head. And I knew that I had to do something differently. And I decided right then I had two choices. I could file for bankruptcy, try to write it off, pick up the pieces and move forward, or I could take a different route. And for some reason, I chose the more difficult route. And it was one that said, I'm going to pay this money back. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to learn what it takes to be successful and stand on my own 2 feet as a man. And that's exactly what I've done. So folks, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to figure out, write down that big goal. And for me, it was writing down a number, a tremendously large 5-figure number. That was the amount of money I needed to pay back to credit cards to get myself out of this hole. Now, my dad thought I was nuts. My family thought I was crazy. My friends were like, what? Dude, just write it off. Walk away. And I said, I can't let myself do that. My integrity won't let me do that. I'm going to have to do this the hard way. I didn't have a steady income. I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from. And I had this very large number sitting in front of me and knew what I was going to have to do. But it started by writing down a goal, committing to a plan, and then making it happen. And folks, that's what you have to do. I don't know what the big scary thing is for you, what it is you're going to have to overcome. There's a certain amount of money you need in the bank. There's a large debt you want to pay off. There's a big purchase you need to make. Maybe your car broke. You need a new car. Maybe you need to make sure that you've got 6 months of rent in the bank and have an emergency fund. Whatever it is that you need, let's figure out what that big thing is. Write it on the calendar as to when it's going to go away, and then let it go. I don't mean forget about it. I mean, if you need those intermediate steps like I did, I knew how much I needed to find every single month to stay ahead. What was it going to do to keep me out of trouble? And once I knew what that amount was, I made the commitment. I set them up on auto draft and said, whether I have the money or not, you're going to tap my account every month. I was going to have to make sure that I did something to hold myself accountable and make sure the money was there. Folks, that was the first step in me finding success for myself. And let me tell you, it was scary. But you can do it. Maybe you're not starting from a place that's quite so difficult. Maybe you're in a point of power. You're at a point of, you've got some cash in the bank. Maybe you've got a plan. Maybe you've got enough money in your account that says, hey, this is my walk-away money, and I can walk away and make it happen. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have a plan? Because having a dream is not enough. You've got to be able to put it into action. So here's the first thing I'm going to ask you to do. Number 1, write down that great big goal. Number 2, write down some smaller intermediate goals that you need to hit along the way to make that happen. And number 3, stick with us on the journey. Come back and listen to us with each and every podcast episode as we share more and more of these stories of what it takes to be successful and find the connections that you need to fire up your success charger. I want you to get plugged in. I want you to fill that battery all the way up. And I want you to be able to cut the cord, go out there, and live a sustainable, happy, successful life. Folks, that's what the podcast is all about. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the weeks to come. So stick with us. Come back. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I'm looking forward to hearing from a lot of the people that we've got some exciting interviews lined up for you. We're going to get behind a lot of these stories that are in the book. Stick with us on the journey. We're looking forward to having you around, and welcome aboard to the Success Charger. Post your 5-star review and subscribe to Success Charger today. Your future is waiting.